both come up with a top 10 favourite movies list. I've cobbled it together. I'm sure Rachel has put more thought into it. And we're going to go for it. I think there'll be some surprises anyway, and some random choices, but I've gone for a mix. I'm sure Rachel's gone for a mix. Was this a hard list for you to put together?
No.
It's quite easy. Okay.
It's easy. I'm a person with their agreement. Yeah, there's only disagreements when Keith is wrong, which does happen, occasionally.
Once in a blue moon, once every 2 years, something like that.
Every 2 weeks, but
never
mind. Films. Most of these films are not nostalgia based, but kind of rooted in films that I've loved for years and years and years. So they're films that either mean something to me or I've had since I was a child. It was actually very easy to put this list together because of just these movies have all pretty much been with me for so many years. What about you? Was it hard for you?
Together, it's random, to be honest. I just opened a page with film names and just pointed, so anything. No. There's some of my personal favourites, but I've also gone for a mix. Like the Samati films, there's some like mainstream blockbusters type films, couple of guilty pleasures, one of which Rachel will approve of, one of which she won't. So yeah, she already knows, I think.
I have props, people. So of course, because these are my 10 favorite movies, I do own them all.
Good.
So
Visuals.
number 10, look, this movie is going to be no surprise. I have been talking about it a lot recently. I'm going to make Keith watch it soon, and it's been with me since I was a child. So coming in at number 10 is the cinematic masterpiece, Spice World, the movie.
I knew it. Carry on talking.
Carry on. Thanks, Russell. I am very annoyed that I only have this on DVD. I know that it's available on Blu-ray in the UK, which really annoys me, but I haven't been able to order it yet.
What a waste of a Blu-ray that is.
But of course, I have it on DVD. Now, of course, this is going to be on the list. This is a band I literally flew halfway across the world to see. I've loved these girls since I was 10 years old. Stephen often gets a bit jealous. He's all like, do you love them more than me? And I'm like, well, I've loved them longer than you. So, it's not really a competition. But look, this movie it's a lot of fun. Look, Keith knew.
I knew they would be somewhere.
Yeah, of course. So look, this is actually a really fun little movie. It's basically just a fictionalized kind of account of the girls. It spends a week in their lives as they prepare for their fictional first ever concert. And you get a bunch of great British actors. You've got Richard E. Grant, who plays their fictional manager. Clifford, he is hilarious. He's always on the verge of a mental breakdown, and it's absolutely brilliant. You've got Roger Moore, who's playing like the bigger manager type, kind of pulling all the strings behind the Spice Girls. It's so funny. You've got him. Alan Cumming plays this fantastic documentary maker who's basically following them around for the week, trying to document them. And then you've got all of these other really fun cameos. The girls, like whoever wrote the script and whoever was working with the girls knew that they're not actors. Okay. They're obviously not actors. So the girls basically just play bigger and more, exaggerated versions of themselves. They basically just have a lot of fun with it, and they leave the heavy acting to the actual actors. Like a lot of the fun stuff comes more from the Richard E. Grant character and, a few of the others. And of course, it's the soundtrack is their second album, which I absolutely love. And it's just really fun and colorful. It was definitely made for the fans, but people who aren't fans enjoy the movie too. And I just think it's just really fun. And because it is my favorite band, a big chunk of my childhood, a huge nostalgia for me. And so, yeah, it had to be on this list. Spice World, Spice Up Your Life, in at number 10. Keith is very disappointed in me now.
Well, I knew it was coming. Well, we will put that theory to the test soon, whether non-fans can enjoy it, because a non-fan will be checking out soon. But I knew you had it coming. I knew, and I approve of your reasonings, even though I'm not expecting to like the movie. Looking forward to the watch along.
Yeah, we all are, Cindy. We all
most are. Sort of on a theme with my number 10, because my number 10 also came out around about the same time, the late 90s. My number 10 also has a bit of a cheesy kind of like feel good, sort of guilty pleasure type vibe. And my number 10 also has Alan Cumming, which is a bit random as well.
That is random.
A great cast. Let's see if you can guess what it is, because this is one of my favourite comfort feel-good movies. And it is...
Is it?
Romeo and
Michelle's high school reunion. When you said Alan Cumming, that was where my mind first went.
Because that's the link. I thought I've struck on gold. I can't believe
that was awesome. And this really did come out around the same time. And you're right, it has a very
about a year before, I think.
Even the costumes are similar.
Quirky, funny, feel-good movies that can't help but lift you. It is so innocent, but also so sweet and charming. Look at the funky 90s outfits. I mean, I wear them every Friday night when I go out.
No.
And I make them work, damn it.
We need pictures.
Well, it's not only a fantastic cast, but I mean, the leads are just so good. I mean, their chemistry is fantastic. Like, you just believe that these are like best friends who have known each other since high school. And like, you shouldn't really root for these characters because, like, in other hands, like in a different movie with different people playing them, they could be like really obnoxious and annoying, and you could just end up on the side of the bully sort of thing. But these are like classic underdog characters, and they've got great fashion.
Yeah, they do.
And it's almost that thing of they stumble upon the fashion accidentally, which sort of makes it more adorable. It's like in a way they don't really know what they're doing, but they just somehow they land on like the perfect sort of outfit. It's got a great classic kind of like feel good soundtrack, you know, like I mean, that Cyndi Lauper, the use of that on the dance floor it just gets you every time. And like, it's one of these movies you sort of know it's going to work out for them in the end. But they have some fun with that along the way with certain twists where you think, well, is it going to have a happy ending? Like, they do play with that a bit, but you sort of know it is. But it's one of those where it's a smartly sort of formulaic sort of film that does play with certain sort of tropes and what have you. And just some of the humor just works because it works. Like, in a way it shouldn't work. Like, I just like the scene with them in the car where they can't remember the words to that Turning Japanese song. Like, they're just making up and it's like, we've all done that, and they sort of do look a bit like silly, but it's really endearing and funny as well. And Lisa Kudrow, as Camille was saying, love Lisa Kudrow. I mean, she's such an X factor of an actress. Like, she just perfected that sort of role in Friends, and she's never bad. Like, anything she's in, she's never bad, Lisa Kudrow. She just sort of has that magic touch. Garofalo, however you say her name, but she's always fantastic whenever she's on screen. And there's just, you go down the cast and there's so many people who would become faces later on and things like that. And as I say, great soundtrack. I love the Tears for Fears song they use when the helicopter's coming in, and You've Got No Doubt, which is a very sort of punky, like 90 choice, and Just a Girl. So they use the soundtrack really well. And there's just some certain films like this which are just unashamedly sort of fun and out there, and it just works. It's a fantastic feel-good romp. That's Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. And
that's a great choice. I never would have guessed, but it's such a fun movie. You're right. And I think both Lisa Kudrow and Mia Savino are really, really good in this, but Lisa Kudrow in particular is just so funny. And yes, Alan Cumming at the end is just so cool that we had that little connection within those first two movies. That's just really funny. But that's a really interesting choice. I saw Romeo and Michelle I think it was back in high school, on like a school bus. We were like going somewhere and they showed the movie while we were traveling there. So you'll know this one because I don't actually talk about this movie often, but this is one of my favorite feel-good movies. It's a movie musical from a couple of decades before the 90s. I've been watching this since I was, probably about 3 years old. Probably one of my favorite movie musicals of all time. Really good. You know it's the word, Grease.
Okay. Yeah.
So, like I said, I've been watching Grease since I was a child. This movie is just so full of feel-good music and just amazing bops. Like, I love so many of the songs in this musical. Now, obviously, we all know the story of Grease. You've got good girl Sandy who falls for bad boy Danny, and the pink ladies and the T-Birds don't want them to be together because, you know, she's the dude, the goody two shoes, and he's the bad boy. And of course, you know, she has her makeover at the end, which every single feminist on the earth hates, but whatever. But I just think Grease is it's just one of those really feel-good movies, you know. The story's not too in-depth. The characters aren't that deep. You basically just watch it for the fun 50s fashion, for the dance competition where you get to watch them do all those fun 50s dances that no one learns anymore, which I'm sorry, I get really annoyed at. I watch these things and I'm like, why don't we get to dance like that in high school? We're all there doing the Macarena, because I grew up in the 90s, so that's the dance I had. Whereas, yes, Russell, it is the only Grease that matters. Did you actually have this?
I called it. I called it. You've mentioned it before.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't too sure, but
you do know me. That's impressive. That's really impressive, because I didn't think I'd mentioned Grease that often. Every time, this is one of those movies that every time I put it on, it just puts a smile on my face. You know, I can have it on in the background if I'm like doing household chores, or I can sit down and watch it if I'm a little tipsy and I want to dance around. I know pretty much every single song to every single word to every single lyric. Every single lyric to every single song. Know the Greased Lightning dance, obviously, and I just absolutely love it. I think Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta had such great chemistry in this movie. I think they really found the best combination. I've never seen the stage musical professionally done. I've seen a amateur production, which is really fun. It is the only Grease that matters. Yep, Grease is the word. Oh, yeah, we did line dancing too,
That's
Cindy.
Great, yeah.
Yep. We did line dancing as well. But this just kind of showed me how much fun. This is probably where my love of musicals comes from. It'd be from this movie. And I remember when I was a girl, when I was about 4 or 5, I wanted one of those twirly dresses that they wear at the dance. So my mum specifically made me a couple of dresses so that I could do the big twirls and feel like I was a little 50s teenager. But I will also, however, blame this movie for the fact that I started smoking, because this movie made smoking look so cool.
So cool, yeah.
So I think it was this movie's influence that turned me into a smoker. But I mean, so many great characters in this. Rizzo, played by Stockard Channing, is one of my favorite mean girls ever. She is so much fun. And then her partner, Kaniki, played by the late Jeff Conaway, he was so good. This is one of those movies, though, that even as a child, I knew that not a single one of these people was a teenager. I'm looking at these people and you are all 40 years old. Not a single one of you is actually 16. But no, it's such a fun movie. Like I said, it's been with me since I was a child. It's another one that's full of nostalgia. But I also just think that it's
Do we know why the movie? Yes. The hair, surely.
The hair, yes. So it's a reference to the Greases and the hair. So yes, and then the song, the Grease is the word song that actually plays at the beginning of the movie, was written specifically for the movie. It doesn't actually exist in the stage musical, so they got the Bee Gees to write it, and they wrote the title song for the movie.
Yeah,
so that's a fun little bit of trivia. But I just absolutely adored this movie, and it will be with me, I think, for the rest of my life, because it just never gets old, never goes out of style, and these songs are just always so good. So that's my number 9, Grease. Grease is the word.
Yeah. I've got chills from that pick, Rachel. I've got to say.
They're multiplying.
They are. They're multiplying. At some point, we'll do a season of musicals. It would be quite
fun, and that would be awesome.
It's I'm not against musicals. There are definitely some that I really like, and some I'm not as big as into them as you, but I'm definitely not against them, because some people do take against them because they are quite a niche sort of thing.
They are. They're not for everyone.
There was in the 90s, early 2000s, there was an indie band in the UK called Kaniki.
That's awesome.
Who named themselves after that, obviously.
That's awesome.
For 9, so if I was dreading the Spice Girls pick from Rachel, she's probably dreading this. So this is one of the great 1980s slasher movies. It's a classic of its genre. It taught like the screenwriters everything they know. Alfred Hitchcock loves this damn movie. It's a fact. And it's got some of the best hammy acting and dialogue ever. And I'm going to repeat it now. You bastard!
Bastard! You bastard!
Oh, there you go. Pieces.
No.
I love this movie. It was tempting to have it higher, to be honest. You don't have to go to Texas for a chainsaw massacre.
Oh, no.
What a great tagline.
That's actually a pretty fun tagline. I will give it that.
Yeah, Russell's in on it.
Russell
great
approves.
Movie. Yeah, great movie. Well, we reviewed it, Russell. You can find the review on the channel. Sadly,
yes,
I didn't put any in the thing. I should have done, but yeah, this is such a smart movie, such a smart mix of like slasher and murder mystery. As I said, Scream sort of ripped it off later on. It's very feminist and progressive. It sort of points out the importance of chop suey to the Asian culture and how important it is. I can believe it's on TV. I've got the DVD roughly. The importance of overall to stock up on chop suey and get into the martial arts once in a while. You've got fantastic storylines like the former international tennis star who they thought would be a great choice to go undercover to try and crack there was that stuff. We had that bizarre scene with the tennis court where someone was being killed and all the crisscrossing of like the shots, which didn't seem to add up, but I think that was the genius of that scene. You had a fantastic twist, one of the best twists in cinema. And then you had some great gore, some great moments of gore, some creepy...
That I will give it.
Yeah, some creepy looking guys. And it's feminist because of the way the chainsaw... It's a knife, isn't it? Cuts into the genitalia at the end, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. No, it's actually a hand.
It's
an 80s hand that comes up and it's like...
Yeah. That annoying guy who they were trying to make like
the guy who's trying to sleep with anything that moves, basically.
Well, he finally got his, didn't he, at the end, and that was fantastic. So, what more can I say? 10 out of 10. This movie is timeless, and that is my number 9. That is Pieces. You can go and find our review on the channel, Russell, because I think you'll enjoy that. But let's say a 1980s slasher's gem. Sounds a bit strange, Camille. Well, strange but addictive is what I'll say.
Just strange.
We'll have to watch. Just strange.
Strange but addictive, like Keith.
King's horses and all the king's men couldn't put the pieces together.
Where did this filth come from? Answer me! Answer me! And I can tell you a couple of things about him. Bastard! Kill you if I ever find stuff like that in the house again. Go get a plastic bag. I'm gonna burn everything. Don't just stand there. Hurry up, stupid, and bring me a plastic bag to junk this stuff.
Let's see. Yeah, I'll take that. That's a compliment. Yeah, I'll take that. All right.
Slugs?
Oh, Slugs. I've heard of Slugs.
You're not going to make me watch that, are you?
Yeah, no, I am.
Because you're terrible. Cindy, what have you done? What have you done?
2 guilty pleasure movies straight away. And
yeah, I think we can rate Grease above Pieces. Thank you very much.
Well, no, I meant my 2, but like...
Oh, your 2. Fair enough.
No, Pieces is better than Grease. Knock it off, Rachel.
was in my top 10 movies of the 80s. I actually think it may have been number one. So this is the first movie I ever saw in the cinema when I was 4 years old. This was my first Disney movie, and it is still my favorite Disney movie to this day, and that is The Little Mermaid.
Okay.
Now I'm actually going to sneak a second movie in, which unfortunately I don't own, but I just want to tell a little story. So I obviously, like I said, this was the first movie I ever saw in the cinema. Russell's afraid I'm coming after him with nig needles. No, not today, Russell. I'm being nice today. So yeah, so this was the first movie I ever saw in the cinema when I was very, very young. I saw it twice, and then I owned it on VHS, so I grew up watching it. I also simultaneously grew up watching another version of The Little Mermaid, which was a anime from, I think, 1976. And I think I got it from the video store. It was one of those movies that was on sale. And that version told the actual story of The Little Mermaid. So it told the original Hans Christian Andersen version where she dies in the end. So I really loved that version. And it also prevented me from having that trauma that a lot of girls my age had when they grew up and realized that The Little Mermaid, the original storyline, is not quite as happy as what's portrayed in this one. So I grew up simultaneously watching those Little Mermaids back to back and absolutely loved them. Now, this movie in particular, I mean, not only do I think it's one of the best Disney animation films out there, it kicked off the Renaissance era, which, in my opinion, is the best Disney era. That's where most of my faves came from. And all of the real classics came from, and it all started with this one. Ariel is my favorite Disney princess. She is the Disney princess I identify with the most, being a rebellious teenager when I was younger and always wanting to do things I wasn't allowed to do. King Triton actually reminds me a lot of my father, and his dynamic with Ariel when I was growing up was very much like I could see my father's relationship mirrored in that. So it was a bit of a personal movie for me on that note, and I always really loved that angle. But I just, it's such a beautiful little story. I like that Disney made it, a happy ending, because obviously in the original story, she does die. And obviously Hans Christian Andersen was a closeted gay man, and there's a lot of that sort of theme about unforbidden love and unspoken love in the original story. But I do love that Disney found a way to give it a happy ending. Oh, Pokey saying it was the first one that he ever saw too. That's really cool.
That's nice. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, and it's one of those films that every time I revisit it again, it just fills me with warmth, The music is fantastic. Part of Your World was one of the earliest Disney songs I ever learned how to sing, and I used to just sing it all the time. Of course, you've got Under the Sea, Kiss the Girl, Poor Unfortunate Souls, all fantastic songs. Ursula is one of the best Disney villains. It's actually a really fun story about Ursula is they couldn't decide her design, even when they had started recording some of the music. And so what they did is they got Pat Carroll, who does the voice of Ursula, to record Poor Unfortunate Souls. And then they put Poor Unfortunate Souls to footage of octopuses on the seabed. And they went, that's it. That's what we need to animate Ursula as, because she was envisioned as like a catfish and a few other things. So I always thought that was really fun. But yeah, just overall, this is just, like I said, it's my favorite Disney movie. It's such a feel-good movie. And Ariel is still just one of my favorite heroines. I love watching her journey. And like I said, definitely the Disney princess that I identify with the most and that I love the most. And it's just, it just reminds me of when Disney was fantastic and when they were doing all these really classic movies. And I just am so grateful that I was born at seriously just the right time to experience the Disney Renaissance and to experience all the magic that it had to offer. A few years ago, my best friend and I went and saw this at the cinema. They re-released it, and it was really funny because it was us and like basically a bunch of like adults with their kids, and she and I, because we know the movie so well, we're sitting there and we're like in hysterics at like the crab scene where like Chef Louis is chasing Sebastian around, and these kids are looking at us like we're absolutely insane, but we just had the time of our lives. So yeah, so that is my number 8, my absolute favorite animation, my favorite Disney animation, The Little Mermaid, 1989. Yes, Laura, I did see the remake. It was terrible. My best friend and I, we forced ourselves to, we're like, if we're going to hate it, we need to make sure that we have seen it all. It's terrible. So definitely stick to the 89 one.
Good movie, good part of that, like golden age, like we said, some good songs, some good storytelling, some good animation. Like I do miss the old school Disney animation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Disney is just one of those things, really, like people of our age and a little bit older, like there's really no one from that kind of group of people who didn't grow up on Disney in some way or the other. Like it would be a constant presence. Not as good as Pieces, but you can't have everything. But maybe better songs than In Pieces. I might
think
give
so.
it that. Yeah. My number 8 is a Dario Argento film. And it's my favorite Dario Argento movie, which might be a little bit of a hot take, because it's not Suspiria. I saw that son of a bitch has already called it. Because we're back to the mid-80s. It is Phenomena, aka Creepers. So this is the one with a young Jennifer Connelly, because this is around the time she was starting to get her break in like movies, not around the similar time to Labyrinth. It's also got Donald Pleasance as a suitably creepy and nerdy kind of professor. And there you go. Scott also loves the movie. Bit of a cult favorite, this one. So, yeah, it's like when you hear the plot, it's absolutely bonkers because the Jennifer Connelly character goes to a boarding school in another country. Her roommate is mysteriously killed. The heavy metal Iron Maiden soundtrack, great use in that movie. But yeah, her roommate is mysteriously killed, and there's this serial killer around town who's kidnapping and killing girls. But the sort of supernatural twist to it is then the Connery character has like psychokinetic abilities which connects to insects, and that means she can like find the killer. She uses that power and the connection to insects to
why
try
not
and solve the case as you do. And the Donald Pleasance character sort of befriends her. He's got a monkey in his lab. He's doing all sorts of weird experiments, and that's sort of what turns her on to this stuff a little bit. So they strike up a bit of a connection. I think he's partly there to be a red herring as well, because Donald Pleasance. But yeah, it sounds like a wacky, insane plot, which it is, but it sort of sounds like it shouldn't work. And yet it just does because of the genius of Argento. And I just love the beauty and the detail of this movie, like the way he uses like weather conditions, like the stormy weather for like atmosphere. There's some fantastic jump scenes in it. He really gets how to do jump scenes. Really great use of color. The performances are good. As I said, that distinct like heavy metal soundtrack, which is just another weird piece of the puzzle that you think maybe shouldn't work, because you think that's a bit of an odd choice for like a horror movie. Horror sort of like thriller type thing, and it just works. It just works as part of it, as just the off-kilter sort of feel. And I think the reason it works so well and is such a good movie and so underrated is then I think Argento at his best does kind of like gothic sort of dreamlike fairy tales, almost like dark type fairy tales. And this is what this has the feel of, I think, like surreal, like music video almost at times, but it has sort of a dark fairy tale sort of logic. So there's a lightness of touch and an attention to detail, which I just love. Yes, the creepy monkey is very creepy, but it just works, like just the whole package. It shouldn't work, but it just works, and it's a fun, trippy cult movie that you follow along. And yeah, it's really creepy, but really beautifully put together and very trippy. So, Phenomena, aka Creepers, which is a cult favorite, and it probably is a hot take saying it's the best Argento, because obviously a lot of people would go with Suspiria. There's one or two others, but I think this one is underrated. So, yeah.
Nice. That's a fun pick. I haven't seen this one, so can't really comment, but I like that it's like a different, because as soon as you said Argento, I was like, Suspiria? But I'd never really heard you speak of Suspiria, so...
Yeah, and it's funny, main theme composed by Bill Wyman, Rolling Stone. So it's interesting how because I think nowadays we're used to kind of having European style movies, which are they've got like Western culture involved and like English speaking people, but it's probably quite rare back then. So you've got a mix of people involved.
I love this movie, and it gets a lot of crap, a lot of crap, for being cheesy, for being too over the top. The romance is bad, blah, blah, blah. But I love this film. And this is a film that really showed me what filmmaking could be behind the scenes, what it's like to really pay attention to detail and to make sure that everything is, just right. And it's also kind of the film that, to subquote Scream 2, gave me my heart on for Cameron. And that is the 1997 masterpiece, Titanic. So,
Okay. Yeah.
you know what? I don't care about the haters. I love this film. So this was the film that introduced me to Kate Winslet, who went on to become one of my favorite ever actresses. This is obviously one of her earliest roles. And I just absolutely fell in love with her as an actress and with Rose DeWitt as a character. Obviously, when I first saw this, I was 12. So as with all other 12-year-olds, I fell completely in love with Leo DiCaprio. But a little funny story. Let's just say that my crush on Leo was very short-lived because I discovered that my mother also had a crush on him. And you don't want to be sharing crushes.
Four for four, baby.
Look at that. Four for four. So good. But no, when my mother came home and started talking about how hot Leo DiCaprio was, it was like, oh, no. The crush is done. So after that, I could never like him again. Funny story. When I went to London with my family, we went to Madame Tussauds, and my mum took a photo next to the Leo DiCaprio wax figure. She then framed that photo and put it on her work desk. She didn't have a photo of my dad. She just had a photo of her and Leo DiCaprio on the work desk. So there we go. Yeah. But look, I think
she's a bit too old for him.
Yeah, and I told her that. I was like, Mother.
A couple of decades.
That's what I said. I was like, Mother, find an age-appropriate crush. Come on, go for the text.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And this, because I have this version that I have here is it's like a 4-disc, special. It has like a million different there's like a million different behind the scenes and like all these documentaries, and I have watched every single one, and watching the making of this film is insane. I just love seeing all the different the sets they build and the perspective, the use of perspective and shooting, the different models they had for the ship. They actually had a tilting deck where they could move it up and down and move the actors, just a lot of the behind the scenes, just seeing how they use certain cameras and how they use certain angles and stuff. Watching the behind the scenes of this movie really made me appreciate all of the behind the scenes of movies, all the stuff that you just don't realize goes into making it such a authentic experience. It's the costume design on this is absolutely amazing. I love the attention to detail. All of the period costumes are beautiful. Rose's costumes in particular tell a really great story if you watch the progression of her costumes from her first scene to her last scene. Obviously, I think that the emotional pull of this movie is really, really great. The romance, not so much. I view this more as a coming of age film, and I watch it more as Rose's story, and I get really invested in her story and the way she survives the sinking. And I just think she's a great anchor and a great central character. But I also think that I remember once a video that I watched on YouTube where someone was talking about Cameron as a director, and they said that Cameron is really good at putting ordinary people in horrifying situations and making you really feel the danger for them. And I think this movie really shows that. When you watch the sinking part of this movie, I think it really encaptures what it must have been like to be in that situation without feeling gratuitous. It doesn't feel like Cameron's making emotional porn or trying to make you exploit what happened. He's just trying to show you everything. And I think that in particular, when when the ship is sinking and when it cracks in half and when you see all of the panic and the chaos, I just think that it works so well to sell that experience. Russell's asking who was the villain in the movie. That would be Billy Zane. Yeah. Billy Zane hamming it up like there is no tomorrow as Caledon Hockley. He is so much fun in this. Kathy Bates as the unsinkable Molly Brown. Absolutely fantastic. Victor Garber as Thomas Andrews, who was one of the ship who was one of the shipbuilders. He was fantastic.
I'm not sure if Billy Zane has ever been called great, Russell. He'll
What are you
for
talking
that.
about? He was fantastic in
He'll
the
buy you a
Phantom.
drink. Yeah, of course he is.
But no, and the score. Oh, the score to this movie. Oh my God,
Score's
James
good,
Horner, so good, and just a beautiful score. And so you know what? Screw all the haters. I don't care. I love this movie, and I will always love this movie. So that's my number 7. Keith is doing very, very well at predicting my favorite movie. Titanic, fight me.
Yeah, I've told this story lots of times, and I do know Cameron is your favorite director as well. But so, is it fair to say that's your favorite Cameron movie?
Yeah,
it is. Okay, yeah, I had a feeling. I was in Critter, so yeah, can't go wrong, really. But yeah, I said this at the time I bought a ticket. I didn't go in because I was like 17, 18, and I was on the fence of it, and I bought the ticket, and I remembered it was 3 hours long, so I was like, fuck that shit. But I actually I watched it this year properly all the way through because I'd seen bits of it on TV, and it's fine. It's solid.
Yeah.
That was.
I remember you came away. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not hating on it. I do agree, and having also watched A Night to Remember this year as well.
Yeah.
I think it's just one of these things. I think Cameron knew how to make it a bit more of an interesting story for the sake of a film.
Yeah.
Than that was, because that played it really straight, and not a lot happened really until you got to the thing at the end, and it's the difference between, because the actual story of the Titanic outside of the disaster isn't really that interesting. But obviously when you've got a movie, you do kind of have to pad it out with stuff for like 2 hours, 3 hours in this case.
I like the ending. I think people misinterpret the ending a lot. A lot of people get pissed at
Is it just showing them as like ghosts?
No, because at the end of Titanic, I don't know if you remember, but old Rose you see her in her room, and I think the implication is that she dies, and then you see the camera pan through the Titanic, and she goes to the estate room, and like everyone who died on the Titanic is there. So it's kind of showing that she's going back to Titanic, and then Jack is at the top of the stairs waiting for her. So I always took it as like she's returning to Titanic because that's where she should have died. So now she's returning to all the people. I can understand why some people might find it a bit hokey. It worked for me.
I prefer Winslet to DiCaprio in it. Like, it's a good coming out role for Winslet in a way. Like, DiCaprio's quite annoying in it, I think, unfortunately, as is Billy Zane. But Kathy Bates is wonderful. She's a legend. I don't know if she won an Oscar. I'm assuming she got nominated.
I think she got nominated for Best Supporting Actress, but I don't think she won. Titanic won a ton of awards, but I don't think it actually won any acting awards.
7 is a French movie, so I should have got out some French red wine.
Oui.
I should have got like a cravat and put that
or
on
a beret or something.
Yeah, a beret or something. A movie called The Green Ray.
No, never heard of it.
Right, very, very fancy. So Eric Romer, who many people called the French Woody Allen, hopefully without the sleaze, but
I was going to say that's not necessarily a good thing.
As in, he did a lot of those kind of observational sort of like romantic comedies. So The Green Ray, which is referencing Jules Verne, it's a reference to like the Jules Verne sort of book which the lead character reads. And it's this really poetic but sort of painful, like coming of age style drama. Well, not really coming of age, but really poetic sort of like style drama, where at the start, this woman, the lead character, Daphne, is going through a breakup. And to make matters worse, her plans for the summer with her friend, they're supposed to go traveling, and her friend cancels the plans at the last minute. So she's going through a breakup, she's going through that. And the movie just becomes this big slice of life, which sort of follows her over the course of that summer. And it just really shows you the painful bittersweetness of being alone during the summer and how isolated it can be, like, because she doesn't really have I think she might be a student, but she doesn't have much to do during those months. obviously plans keep getting foiled. She has a collection of encounters with different people. And sometimes it seems to be going quite well, but then there's a bit of a snag, a bit like in life. And it's just this really naturally slow-paced sort of drama, but you never really feel the pace. It just plays out in a very engrossing, captivating sort of way. There's a beautiful scene where she goes on holiday and she goes to this beach in like France, and there's no one else on the beach. She's all alone. So kind of isolation. Beautiful use of a cat in one scene, Rachel. So that's something you will approve of. A cat just like jumping along a garden wall, you know, in the brightness of summer. And again, like my last film, it actually uses the weather like really well. Lead performance is very good. She's very natural, really sort of observational. But it's a great movie because it's a movie which feels so true to life and so authentic about the awkwardness of these kinds of things and relationships and kind of finding your way. It's about a young woman still trying to find a way in life and learning to deal with disappointment. So it's very melancholic, but also it's a very like stylish sort of film, very sort of poetic, like the scene where you actually get the green ray of the title, like, and you see it kind of flash before her eyes. So it's very cinematic to go along with like how natural it feels. Like it never really feels like it's kind of being too sort of flashy. It just feels like a very thought-provoking kind of realistic drama, and it's just got a gentle hand to it. Whereas if it didn't have that, if it didn't have this great lead character or performance, you might get bored with it, or you might find the character too stroppy, or it might just be that it wouldn't be that engrossing. But sometimes less is more, and it almost feels like that. It almost feels like at times not that much is happening, but that's kind of the beauty of it. And it's like not a lot is happening, but in a very engrossing way, basically. And it's very rarely I see a film like once and it's one of my favorite movies, but that's what happened with this movie when I saw it at a screening. So yeah, go and track it down. It's worth checking out.
Yeah, no, it sounds really interesting and like a really sweet movie to watch. I love when you have like these weird like random picks that I would never ever have heard of or seen. You definitely watch a very wide variety of movies, which I really love because you're always dropping like these names, these movies that I've never heard of and stuff like that. So I'm gonna definitely have to try and track that one down.
Like I think you would quite like it, and Cindy says it's on a watch list, so that's good.
If Keith can go 5 for 5, which I think he actually can, because this next movie is another movie that we have talked about before. It's probably my favorite comedy of all time. It's actually another 80s movie, which is surprising because we all know I'm not a fan of that decade. And it's a movie that we recently watched on stream together. Very, very, I think it was only within the last week or so. And that is the classic dark comedy, Heathers. Anyone, I think a lot of you guys were actually around with us and you were there on the stream. We did recently watch this to kind of pay tribute to Shannon Doherty, because this was one of her earliest films where she plays Heather Duke. So, of course, because we watched it recently and we did a discussion of it, I don't need to go too deep into it. But I've talked about this before, but I love black comedy. And I think if black comedy is done well and smartly, it can be so good. And I think Heathers is one of the best examples of how to do black comedy. There we go. We're going 5 for 5. I think I'm a little too predictable. There's got to be at least one movie in here that you don't predict, but we'll see. But yeah, I mean, as we rediscovered when we watched on stream the other day, such a smart script, such well-written characters, very quippy, very pithy. There's some great commentary on, the way suicide was viewed at the time, the way teens sensationalization of, depression and suicide and all of that was great. You've got your two great leads, Winona Ryder in one of her earliest roles. Just so much fun. It was a fun watch party, Russell. We had a lot of fun doing that. And of course, Christian Slater channeling his very best Jack Nicholson. And yeah, I just, like we discovered, it's just such a great movie, well paced, well acted, and just great social commentary. And of course, you've got the fantastic 80s fashion, the shoulder pads and the perms and the leggings and the hats. Winona has her amazing collection of 80s hats that we were commenting on. But yeah, I don't think I need to say much else because we did just watch it recently, but I absolutely freaking adore this film. So that is my number 6, and Keith has guessed it again. Heathers. There we go.
Yeah, it's a staple from the 80s, a standout from the decade, and a standout for teen drama and teen comedy. And I think it just gets better with age because, like we were saying, when you see some of the stuff that came out in the 90s after it, some of the culture, which it almost predicted in a way, like it was ahead of its time and very influential. It changed what a teen movie could be. And they just nailed the casting. It just gets better with age. An 80s film to another 80s film. And again, again, coincidence, I do have films from other decades.
Do you really?
Well, one from the 90s, and there are some from other decades, but okay. So another 80s film. Rewatched in last couple weeks, which I think is a very underrated film. It's a very early Michael Mann film, and it is Manhunter. The original...
I did see you mention that recently.
Well, not Anthony, but the original Hannibal Lecter movie. So it's based on Red Dragon. So it's the first film based on that, the original novel. And of course, rather than Callister, in which Silence of the Lambs follow, it follows Will Graham, his first appearance on screen. And he's just this sort of tortured, like disturbed kind of almost anti-hero. So the movie starts with him in semi-retirement because of a case from the past involving Hannibal Lecter, who is now in prison. And Will Graham was the man who put him there. But the experience in that case was so intense. Graham goes into early retirement, so he's living a happy sort of life with his family at the start of the movie, but he's still haunted by the past. He is taught to come back out of retirement, sort of one last case, and that's the case of the Tooth Fairy, the serial killer, the Tooth Fairy, played by Tom Newman, who tends to play those kinds of roles, but he's talked into it anyway. And that's a big thing. Then the past case and this case consistently haunts Graham. He's very brooding, very determined to crack it. But we see the effects it has on him and his family life. That's a big part of the movie. And you get this classic slow burns procedural type thing. And it's an amazing movie. I mean, I love Planet of the Apes. Where did I love Silence of the... Well, it was an animal, but I got the wrong animal.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I love Silence of the Lambs. It's a great movie, but this is my unpopular opinion because I think Manhunter is even better.
Yeah, you said that, that is definitely a controversial opinion.
Yeah, it is a little bit. So, yeah, William Peterson, that's how he got cast, actually. Like, the director, Michael Mann, saw him in that movie, To Live and Die in LA, which is a William Friedkin movie. Funnily enough, William Friedkin, even though I don't know him as an actor, he was being considered to play Lecter in the movie. I read that in the trivia. Great casting with William Peterson. I kind of like how he's almost like more disturbed and unhinged than the actual killer in some ways. And they do that brilliant thing of making you actually care a little bit about the serial killer. Like there's a little bit of humanity to him. It's quite brilliantly done. But they cast it so well. Understated, very different portrayal of Lecter by Brian Cox, who was a virtual unknown at the time. And it's just a great alternative. You know, it's less theatrical, less sort of hammy than Hopkins. And I know in the original film, Hopkins is known as a great, like, performer, and he won the Oscar. But then later on, as it became too much of a franchise, of course, they got a bit carried away and they overexposed the character, and like we got the really hammy Anthony Hopkins we get now. And it's sort of funny because people do comment about how there's less screen time than you realize for Hopkins, and he makes the most of it. Well, that's even more true in this movie because Lecter has even less screen time in this, and Brian Cox, who we both agree is a great actor, of a very icy public schoolboy type performance from Cox as Lecter, like very more controlled and icy. Wonderful cameo appearance. They really make the most of it, and he's important to the story, but he doesn't outstay his welcome. But the actual like drama of it and the tension, it's a classic thriller. It's so well paced and slow burn. And you don't even see the villain until an hour into the movie. And that's always so satisfying. Like, it really makes the most of that. And they sort of give him his own, like, plot, really, as the two plots slowly come together. But by putting him off, it really makes his appearance more impactful. And he's a great villain. Like, he's got a very Frankenstein monster sort of appearance to him, and they sort of play on that. But they also have this fascinating subplot, which is like a Beauty and the Beast style subplot almost, with a very young Joan Allen, who plays a blind woman. And she's very good. I read that she did research. She went to like the Federation of the Blind to do research, and she is very convincing. And they have some great scenes, but it's almost that thing of he's drawn to her because he's a bit of a disfigured kind of like oddball. So he's drawn to her because she's seen as other a little bit as well because of her blindness. And they have a very quite a moving but also unsettling like relationship because she has no idea who this guy is. The perfect mood and style to the movie. So it's got this really distinct soundtrack with all these kind of prog rock and synth and kind of like experimental rock type artists. And they just use it perfectly in the scenes to like build up the tension and the dread. It's one of these classic horror / thrillers that just grips you from start to finish. I think we'll review it one day, but there's a lot of great stylistic choices, like the use of like light and dark, shadows, what have you, the contrast there. And yeah, it will just keep you on the edge of your seat until the end of the movie. It's a standout thrill for me. It does get some love, but in some ways it has been forgotten as well. I think it's a bit of an 80s gem and one of Michael Mann's best films, I think. So, and as I said, I love Silence of the Lambs, but I do think this is that little bit better. So,
wow.
From 86.
Yeah, that's I haven't seen it, but that's a bold statement to say that it's better than Silence of the Lambs and that you prefer Brian Cox to Anthony Hopkins, because I mean when you think of Anthony Hopkins, that's almost always the character that you think of. You think of Hannibal Lecter, and I just can't imagine anyone playing him better than Anthony. I mean, I don't doubt, like, Brian Cox is a great actor. He always impresses me, but you know, Anthony is so good in Silence, and it's just, yeah. No, I almost said Will Graham played by Ed Norton, but no, I think that's Red Dragon, isn't it? That's which
I've never seen. I mean,
no,
I had an
either.
idea that we'll do the franchise one time. We'll do the Silence of the, Hopkins movies, because there's not that many, but
I think there's only like 4 or something, 3.
4 or 5, because I know you got like Hannibal Rising, and it got to the point
right, of course,
where it became too much of a franchise, really. But yeah, I think you would like Manhunter. In a way, it's an alternative to, like Cindy says. Yeah, he was in that episode, and he plays a serial killer in that as well. He does tend to play those kind of roles, but he's very unsettling, that character. And I've been listening to the soundtrack a couple of times since because it really sticks with you, the soundtrack.
So my number 5 is a movie that we have reviewed together. It was a very, very long review. It got very in-depth, and that is understandable considering the type of movie that this is. So I've talked about this before. This is the movie that really made me realize what film could be, because I didn't get to watch a lot of film growing up. A lot of the film I watched was just mostly generic, average Hollywood blockbusters. So this was the first movie that made me go, holy crap, you can really do things with film. You don't have to tell a linear storyline. You don't have to even tell a storyline that makes sense. It really introduced me to symbolism and a lot of color work and direction and all of that. And that is my absolute favorite David Lynch film, Mulholland Drive. Of course.
Yeah, I thought it might be on there.
You knew it would be on here.
Very good.
So the reason I ended up still seeing this movie was quite funny. It was during film studies class in high school, and we had to pick a director to study and give a presentation on. I actually initially wanted to do Baz Luhrmann, and another student managed to get Baz Luhrmann before I did. So I decided to choose David Lynch because I'd heard of Mulholland Drive and I wanted to watch it, and I wanted an excuse to watch it. So I chose to do my presentation on David Lynch. Got the highest mark, by the way. Just a little brag there. So I sat down and watched this, and it was the most confusing thing I've ever watched. I remember sitting there at the end of the movie just going, what just happened? But then you rewatch it and you rewatch it. So, I mean, it's very hard to explain the storyline of this movie, especially because of how it changes things up so much. But you basically have Naomi Watts, who plays this character Betty, who has arrived in Hollywood to kind of seek fame and fortune and, audition. And she ends up meeting this amnesiac woman, who they end up calling Rita. And the mystery is like, who is Rita? Why does she have no memory? What happened to her? And it's called Mulholland Drive because Rita was in a car crash on Mulholland Drive. Now, of course, this movie becomes so much more, and it's such a great dive into identity and what makes us, the way we perceive ourselves, the way we perceive others, what is reality, what is not, how far can you go to lie to yourself? It delves into relationship dynamics. It delves into Hollywood. And of course, it's Lynch, so it's filmed in like the most beautiful way. Gorgeous setting, gorgeous lighting. There's some real horror moments in this. Anyone who's seen it, if I say the Winky scene, you will instantly know exactly what I'm talking about. Such a great scene. And just so much symbolism in this movie. And obviously, Keith and I have reviewed it. It's a very long review. We really got in deep into this movie. And yes, it does have a Blu-ray, Russell. So yeah. Like, I don't want to, unfortunately, it's one of those movies that you can't really give too much away because you will spoil the movie, or you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those films that's like, you just have to experience it. And yes, as Cindy said, Mulholland Drive, it is an experience. Like, I remember they re-released it into the cinema a few years ago, and I took Steven to see it, and I kept telling him, I can't prepare you for this movie. I'm sorry, there's no way to prepare you for this movie. You've got no idea what you're walking into. And he yelled at me for the entire car ride home about this movie because he was so frustrated. However, when I sat down to watch it, when we reviewed it, he sat down and watched it with me. So it has that pull of like, you need to revisit it and you need to rewatch it. And it's just, it was one of those movies that just really hit me and stayed with me and just left such an impact on me. And it's not a movie I rewatch often because it is, it's such a heavy film. Yeah. And you really have to get into it. But when you do rewatch it and you do immerse yourself in it, and, I think this is one of Naomi Watts' earliest roles. She was about to quit Hollywood when she got this role, and she's really good in it. Very, very good as like the fresh face ingenue. And Laura Harris, yes. She's really good as Rita as well. And then you've got Justin Theroux as like the down and out director, and that hilariously random cameo from Billy Ray Cyrus. It's just so odd. Oh, and of course, Keith and I have talked about this, the worst hitman ever. In this film. Like,
t-shirt in the making.
The worst hitman ever. So yes, Mulholland Drive is definitely a movie I would recommend everyone check out, although there is nothing that's going to prepare you for this movie.
Absolutely.
absolutely nothing, but it's brilliant. It's really what taught me what film could be, and really opened my eyes up to like cinema and how amazing and dynamic it can be. And I've loved it ever since. So that is my number 5, and Keith is 6 for 6. He is doing well. So yeah, that is Mulholland Drive at number 5.
Definitely one of the films that we really bonded over and had a fantastic discussion. He's probably upset, Lorraine, from Billy Ray's totally different.
Love it.
Some more, you bastard.
Yeah.
And the whole jury. My number 5, and you've already got a sneak peek of this. My number 5 is Alien. No spoilers there. The original Alien that kickstarted the franchise. And great nostalgia. Well, I wasn't born, but great nostalgia for a time when Ridley Scott was such an original filmmaker and one of the hottest filmmakers on the planet. And this really redefined sci-fi and redefined the sort of horror movie and the monster movie. And that's what I love. It combines those two genres so perfectly, because I think up to that point, very often, I mean, you get some films, maybe B movies, that sort of have a crossover, but quite separate. And I think that's what makes that original Alien so satisfying, is it merges the two genres so well. So it's almost, I say this a lot, but it's almost like one of the greatest horror movies ever and one of the greatest sci-fi movies ever combined. And we always have to reference the tagline. We have to reference, in space, no one can hear you scream. One of the greatest taglines.
It is a great tagline.
And I miss movies having great taglines like that. The design of it is so wonderful, so ahead of its time. The design of the xenomorph, which became one of the creepiest, most terrifying villains or monsters than you ever see. But again, like I was talking about with Manhunter, it's almost like you slowly build to it, like slow sort of show, don't tell. You build up the tension of the ship, and there's something lurking in the ship. What is it? Character slowly picked off. And it just makes every death count, because it waits until quite deep into the movie to do the first one. There's some great jump scares, so he really got how to do jump scares as well. You've got like that classic scene with the cat, which is a little bit of a fake out Jonesy. Great cinematic cat, great practical effects, great design, and they really make you wait for the alien and its first kill, so it makes those kills count. You've got a great cast of characters, great character actors, so the late Ian Holm, the late Harry Dean Stanton, you've got like Tom Skerritt, you've got a bunch of great character actors, and of course an unknown Sigourney Weaver. And this was a big movie in like pushing her to the forefront. And now you can't, I mean, you can now because it's been some time later, but in a way you can't imagine those early movies without her. And it was such a important female role, you know, in sci-fi, which had been up to that point mostly male dominated. So the Alien movies were very big in pushing her to the forefront and becoming a bit more feminist, which is something the Cameron movie really builds on really well as well. You know, exceptional sequel. That's a great example of how you do a sequel. You kind of build and do a bit of a tribute to what came before, but you also do your own thing. They feel like distinct films in their own right, and they both work really well. Because Cameron definitely brings a bit more of an action vibe to it, and definitely builds on some of the mythology. But yeah, the original Alien is just so good, so ahead of its time. I love as I said, the old school design of the ship, and what have you. But it really takes some skill to like merge sci-fi and horror in such a unforgettable way, where it's almost like a creature feature in outer space, and I absolutely love that about it. And you've got great drama amongst the characters. When I saw it a few years ago, I actually forgot about the twist with the Ian Holm character, which I won't say here in case anyone has seen it, but that's a surprise if you don't know about that. And Ian Holm, who was a great actor, like he plays that so well. So when the thing is revealed, it's like, okay, that actually makes sense because of how he's been acting in the movie. But that's great stuff. Yeah, it's a classic. Alien's a classic, and it holds up all these years later. And as I said, it changed sci-fi and horror cinema forever. So that is Alien, my number 5.
I finally predicted one of yours, although I had a clue, but I got it.
Good for you. Good for you.
No, great choice. I watched it in film studies class, and I actually haven't watched it since. So I think it's definitely a franchise we'll have to do a deep dive, because there'll be a lot to discuss and a lot to go into with that. It'll be, but you know what? I mean, I think that Alien did such a great service for female characters with Ripley, because I think they actually did originally want it to be a male character, and the script was changed so that Sigourney's character could be the thing, and just pushing female characters forward. And she really is, I mean, you can call her a final girl, like she is technically a final girl. And I just think, like you said, like Cameron takes that in the sequel and really runs with that kind of feminist, really kind of, I hate to use the term, but strong female character. But Ripley's definitely one of the blueprints that they were able to use for future films just across all genres. So that's a great pick. Alrighty, this next one you're definitely going to know, because we've reviewed it. I talk about it all the time, and we don't really need to go into it. I'm not going to give a huge thing, but this is my favorite horror movie of all time. So coming in at number 4 is Scream. So of course, like everyone knows how much I love this. This is actually my four Blu-ray set of the first 4 films, which I just broke. But the original film is, I mean, it is one of my favorite films of all time. We've done a huge dive into the whole series. Obviously on the Night Watch Zone channel, I've done a big dive over there. I've talked about it all the time. Everyone who's in the chat knows what this movie is about, knows how great it is. And it ticks all my boxes. It's got a great female lead. It's 90s. It's slasher. It's the ultimate. Like, I know a lot of people say Halloween is the ultimate slasher film, but I really think Scream is, because it just revived that genre and is just so great. And of course, the late great Wes Craven, one of my favorite directors. The direction in Scream is so good. That opening scene alone is everyone's really shocked by this choice. That opening scene alone is just a masterclass in like suspense and horror, and just poor Drew Barrymore just running around the house, and just so great. And we all know that I love the whole franchise. I love all the films in the franchise, including number 3, which is awesome, Keith. But whatever. If Keith and I were in the same space right now, I would be whacking him over the head with this, saying Scream 3 is awesome, but I can't. The first Scream, my favorite horror movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, obviously ranks really high in my list. So that's number 4, the original Scream. I think that's all I need to say.
Pretty dull movie, isn't it, Rachel? Pretty boring, overrated. I don't really get the hype. No, it is a good one. It's a good one. It holds up. A good rewatch. Very iconic for the times. And we've reviewed all the Scream movies on the channel, so you can take you to task on the Halloween comment, because Halloween is the better movie without doubt. But and of course we wouldn't have Scream without Halloween. So number 4 now. So I'm going back to the 80s, and I'm going.
Did we ever leave?
Well, I certainly didn't. And I'm going back to the future, baby.
Oh, okay.
It is Back to the Future, which I think is one of the greatest blockbuster movies of all time. It just does everything, this movie. Again, it's a really inventive, fresh sci-fi movie for the times. Perfect casting in like Michael J. Fox and Doc
almost
Brown.
Not perfect casting.
Almost not
Eric Stoltz.
There's some wonderful stories behind the making of this movie. Michael J. Fox is so great. Has so much charisma, great comic timing. He has some great physical humor. Like, this guy just had it all. It's a really shame about what happened with him with his condition and what have you, and that's become a brave fight for him. He's acted with a lot of grace around that whole thing, but he is such a standout performer. And it would be hard again maybe to like this character like in the hands of a different actor or a different script, but he does make you like he just has that enthusiasm, and you really believe in this character and want to go on a journey. And you know, Doc Christopher Lloyd. Yeah, he sort of, again, he made that sort of quirky, off-ball, kind of wacky scientist. That became a thing after this character in many ways. And again, he just makes it lovable, and you just enjoy their relationship. Like, it wouldn't be Back to the Future without them. And
no,
the actors just have great chemistry. Like, you get the impression they enjoyed hanging out, like, on and off the set, really. So they, like, just their enthusiasm, and because obviously it's a really good trilogy of films. The sequels both had something to it as well, and you just go on this journey with them and see them grow over the 3 movies. But dazzling, really good special effects for the time. It's a movie with a lot of heart. It almost feels like a throwback movie, but doing it in a sci-fi premise, which I really love. Like, it's almost this idea of, like, it's almost like a Frank Capra type movie, so a very old-fashioned style movie, but it's packaged in like this sort of more like eccentric kind of electric sci-fi type movie. And it just has a bit of everything that you want from a great blockbuster. It's got great characters, it's got great humor, it's got charm, it's got a little bit of romance thrown in, it's got a really great soundtrack, like the rock and roll style like tracks on the soundtrack. I just love the fact that he's a wannabe musician in like the opening of the movie, like, and he sort of goofies up at the battles of the band, but then he gets to be his own. Like, he gets to introduce like the 50s crowd to like music that's going to be in the future.
Yeah.
And that's something they do so well throughout the movie. Like, they really use the time travel and the sort of thing that you might do if you were like come from like the future. I love the whole Clint Eastwood gag in the 3rd movie when they're in the West. Like, he calls himself Clint Eastwood, which is brilliant. And I just love the way they shake things up and play with the different kind of things that they just change. It's like through the horse manure, like he crashes into the truck with the horse manure, but changing up what that is in each movie. And Billy Zane's in one of them. He's in Back to the Future too. So we've got another Billy Zane.
Nice.
It all comes back to Billy Zane. But yeah, I think it's such a well-written movie, the first one. It's a perfect script. You can't really pick, because it's cause and effect. It's that classic thing Hollywood did when it was at its best. And it's why it's so frustrating that so much Hollywood produces nowadays repetitive and really samey, and just a lack of originality, just bad writing a lot of times. And but this is the perfect script. Like, you can't really pick faults. So there's things like The Letter, which anyone who's seen the movie knows what I mean by that, but the way that comes back, you get really dramatic set pieces that are really tense and make the ending so much more rewarding. So the stuff at the dance is quite intense when he looks at the picture and like they're fading. And then the stuff with the clock tower is so iconic. Like, it's just so well done. And it's just done in a way where every time you think it's not quite going to go right, even though you know, it's that kind of movie, it's going to work out in the end. But the tension is there. Like, that clock tower scene is so intense. And you just punch the air every time it does work out. And it's a great story, great character, wonderful, timeless movie, and a really great trilogy. I always enjoy rewatching these, and they were a big part of my childhood. The 3rd one was actually one of my early cinematic memories, because the 3rd one came out in 90, so I was sort of just old enough to watch it, whereas the other 2 I weren't quite old enough. And I remember seeing the 3rd one in the cinema, so that was a lot of fun. But yeah, Back to the Future, it's just timeless. That's my number.
And it's filmed in Stars Hollow.
Yeah, that's a great fact that you picked out.
Actually, I think this was the original movie to use that set, and then the set went on to be used, for so long and for so many years, but I'm pretty sure this was the original movie with the original set. So it's technically the Back to the Future set, not Stars Hollow. But yeah, I used to love the film back when I was a kid, but I haven't seen it in so many years. So it's definitely we'll have to visit it at some point and do a review. But I always think of Stranger Things season 3 when Robin and Steve are like high and they sneak in to see Back to the Future, and then afterwards Robin's like, "Now, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that mom was trying to bang her son."
yeah. That's always something. Yeah. And those scenes are so well played. It's like,
they are.
I love how he's judging the mother. You smoke? And like he's judging her because it's like his mother and stuff.
I know, right? He's so horrified.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff. Okay.
Great pick.
Yeah, decent sequel as well, Yeah, some people prefer to because it's the darker sequel and stuff, but...
May not have guessed. I have talked about this movie briefly, and I have mentioned the play that it's based on and how much I love the play. Okay. Now, because you had Halloween in there's obviously one movie that you're missing, and I'm wondering if it's going to be this one, because I think my top 2 you might actually know. So we're actually going to the 60s for this movie. So this is probably the oldest movie that I've got in my top 10s. And this is an adaptation of my favorite Shakespeare play, and that is Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet from 1968. Did you have this one?
I didn't get this.
Yeah, I thought this would be the one that you wouldn't get. So a funny story about me. I actually got into Shakespeare really young. When I was in school, English was always my favorite topic. I love reading books and I loved poetry. And when I was 10, I read a young adult novel where within the novel, the characters in the novel were putting on the play Romeo and Juliet. And so the novel gave me the details of the story and also had a bunch of the verses in there. And I used to read the verses. And even though I didn't quite understand them, I really fell in love with the language and with the story. And it just so happened to be the same year that the Baz Luhrmann version came out in the cinema. So they released this onto TV and I taped it off TV. And I absolutely fell in love with this movie. First of all, I love the story of Romeo and Juliet. I think the ageism shown towards this play is ridiculous. Everyone wants to talk about stupid teenagers running off and getting married and getting everyone killed. They kind of miss the point of the movie. And I actually have on my channel, I have a big a video dissecting this and the Baz Luhrmann version. And I am also planning to do a movie defending Romeo and Juliet and talking about the themes of it. But this stars Olivia Hussey, who horror fans will know as Jess from Black Christmas. Yes, and Leonard Whiting, who is a Zac Efron lookalike. So anyone who watches this and has watched High School Musical is like, oh my God, it's Zac Efron doing Shakespeare. They play the titular characters, and they were actually quite close in age to what the characters are supposed to be. So Olivia was 15 and Leonard was 17. Amazing chemistry. And when you're working with Romeo and Juliet, you need actors who have amazing chemistry because you need actors that can sell a romance that is so quick. Yes, you do need permission slips signed to watch this because this has nudity in it. So you obviously need the permission for that. This is obviously set in the correct period. So this is set back in I think it's the 1500s. Beautiful set design. Beautiful costume design, like absolutely gorgeous. They also color code the Capulets and the Montagues, so you always know which family you're dealing with. The casting of it is fantastic. You've got Michael York as Tybalt, and he is like one of the best pieces of casting. Oh yeah, he is fantastic. And this movie really dives into, like, it really focuses on Romeo and Juliet and on their characters and their characterization and what these two actually go through this movie, because this is really a story about two children who are caught in a war between their families that they have nothing to do with, but that prevents them from, you know, living out their lives the way they want to. And that's kind of where the whole thing with Romeo and Juliet, with them not being able to be together, is because their families are at war. So I just think that this movie really gets that. The performances from these two actors, especially considering how young they were, the way they so naturally recite iambic pentameter and make these words sound real and natural and alive. Their scenes together are so good. The score for this movie is so beautiful. It's absolutely breathtaking. And Franco Zeffirelli, his direction is just so good. It's a really sumptuous design. If that makes sense. Like, you watch this and everything is so rich and vibrant and beautiful, and the way they've recreated this world and recreated these families, it's just amazing. Of course, I cry buckets in this movie because it is a tragedy. And of course, the end scene is so well done. The death scenes are beautiful, and I will always love this version. Like the Baz Luhrmann version, I have a very love-hate relationship with, because I love Baz as a director, and I think that his style is very dynamic, and I think that it was great that he modernized Shakespeare and kind of brought it into an MTV generation that might not like the play. But Leo DiCaprio does not know how to recite iambic pentameter, and Claire Danes is they kind of diminish Juliet. So I always prefer this version. And like I said, my video really delves into the two different adaptations and how they affect the characters. But yeah, this movie I have loved since I was 10. I will continue to love it. I rewatch it really frequently. It's sumptuous. It's beautiful. The two main leads are fantastic. They really sell the story. And it's a version of one of my favorite stories. It's my favorite Shakespeare play. So that's my number 3. The one movie that stumped Keith, 1968, Franco Zeffirelli, Romeo and Juliet. Keith doesn't know me that well.
Yeah, no, interesting. I do know that you're a big Shakespeare fan, especially that. Yeah. I'm guessing that's your favorite play of his.
It is, yeah.
So, yeah. And yeah, I do always hear good things about that version, but I've never seen it.
Well, if you're ever interested, maybe I'll make it one of my picks for our watch
Rachel's
party or something.
Picks, yeah. or just a watch party, yeah.
Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, no, it sounds interesting. Yeah. And you don't really see Olivia Hussey in enough things, so it's good.
No. She did that. She did Black Christmas. She did a version of there was a TV movie called Jesus of Nazareth where she played the Virgin Mary. She's obviously in It, 1990. I've seen her in a couple other things here and there. But yeah, she didn't seem to quite break out the way I think she should have, especially after this film. But she's a very talented actress.
Next film is from the 60s, proving...
Oh, look at that.
An 80s guy. But this is also
like I have one movie that's not from the 80s.
Comedy, but a darker comedy. And that is The Apartment. Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine. This is a classic. I watched this for the first time probably about 10 years ago, and then I've watched it a couple of times since on rewatches. And it's just such a beautiful, witty, funny movie. You've got great leads there in Jack Lemmon, who was like a comedy legend, Shirley MacLaine, always wonderful. And that's the thing, like in many ways I think people think of it as a romantic sort of comedy or romantic drama, and in some ways it is, but I think it's also a darker movie than people realize. And I think it's a very tough and realistic movie, I think, in many ways, because you have these two people, very different people, who come together. She works as the elevator girl in the apartment building, and Jack Lemmon's character works at. Jack Lemmon's character, one of the great underdogs of cinema, really. But like, he works there, but he's kind of a lonely employee, sort of stepped on by the bosses and the higher up. And part of the twist is that they sort of use his apartment to bring back girls. So he's really used as a bit of a doormat, and he's got attraction towards the Shirley MacLaine character, and it's a great will they won't they. At some point he finds out she has a thing going with the boss. But that's the thing, is that it's a real sort of satire on like sort of almost like capitalism sort of thing, and kind of like on masculinity as well. Like, I think the fact it's set in this apartment block, or you've got like the building that he lives in, it's almost like showing a visual sort of hierarchy of these sort of things and these characters. And Billy Wilder was a great director, but he was an even better writer. Like the way he writ these characters, where they feel so true to life, they're so relatable. There's just some great lines of dialogue in there. There's a lot of humanity to the film. As I said, it has a lot to say about this kind of like real life situations and characters. It's a great sort of Christmas movie in a way. People forget that because it's set over the Christmas period. It goes into New Year's. the scene in New Year's is very sort of famous, but it does take a really dark turn at one point, but you really root for these characters. They've got great chemistry, and it's a bit of a comedy classic, a bit of a romantic classic in some ways. And it ends with one of my favourite lines ever, one of my favourite closing lines to any movie, which is, of course, "Shut up and deal." And that's kind of the line at the end of the movie as they're playing cards. And she just cuts to the chase, "Shut up and deal." So, yeah, great film. The Apartment from 1960, a Billy Wilder classic. So sort of a classic from that golden era of Hollywood. Yeah.
Nice. I haven't seen this film, but I have heard of it, and I've actually watched like video essays on it because I know that it was quite like it had a lot of social commentary built into it. With Shirley MacLaine's character and yeah, just the way the men would treat her and her relationship to everything. So yeah, I definitely do want to check it out at some point. So that can be another one that we can pop on the watch. But it's kind of cool how we went from a 60s movie to a 60s movie because neither of us have ever really talked that much about 60s movies. So that worked out well. Alrighty, so we are now in top two favorite movies of all time. So coming in at my number 2 is a movie that is based on a book, and both the movie and the book, I think, are vastly misunderstood. You really need to understand that the movie and the books, they're both actually a bit of a satire, like a wry, dark commentary, which a lot of people don't get because the name of this movie tends to drive people away because they envision really dark subject matter, and it is dark subject matter, but it's dark subject matter done in a very interesting way. So this film was this director's debut film. She's one of my favorite directors, and it also stars one of my favorite actresses, and that is 1999's The Virgin Suicides, directed by Sofia Coppola. So this was her debut film, and it is a brilliant debut film. Like, I know that the girl comes from like extreme cinema royalty, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee you talent. That guarantees you connections, and nepotism, but you still need to come with talent. And in this movie, I think that I had a feeling that you would know this one because I've talked about this before, and I saw this movie in the cinema. I saw it with my parents, which was not a good choice to see this movie with your parents. There are some very awkward scenes, and I was only 14 at the time. I actually remember this was, I think, one of the first MA movies that I was allowed to watch because my mother was a big believer in censorship. I loved this movie. The imagery in it, the acting in it. So it, of course, stars Kirsten Dunst as one of the Lisbon sisters. AJ Cook is another one of the Lisbon sisters. And there's 5 of them in total. And then James Wood and Kathleen Turner play the parents. And they are very, very good. And it's narrated by Giovanni Ribisi, who narrates the boys who actually narrate the story. That it's romanticizing the girls and that we're supposed to feel sorry for the boys who watch them. But that's not the point. The point is we're supposed to see these boys as complete losers who haven't been able to move on from these girls. And the whole point is like commentary on how they don't see the girls as humans. They see them as like objects, as these glittering objects that they can't get near. And it's all about how no one really gets to know these girls because everyone is too busy objectifying them and turning them into like symbols. And it's just, the novel has this really great, almost black commentary that really shows you how little the boys understand these 4 girls. And we're never supposed to really know why, because the boys never know why. There's actually a really great scene in the novel where the boys are invited for a party at the Lisbon house, and they go and they see the girls, and they suddenly have this realization. They're like, holy shit, these aren't just 5 identical, beautiful girls. They all look different. They all have their own personalities. They all have their own features. And it's such a stark moment to really show you how much they objectify the girls. Now, Sofia Coppola has a really dreamy kind of fantasy-like way of directing. And this movie is set in the 70s, and she really takes advantage of that setting. Everything's soft, everything glows, everything has that kind of, autumny feel that doesn't quite feel realistic. And then you get this really dark story of, and this isn't a spoiler, guys, this comes up right in the title, of these 5 teenage girls who commit suicide in the 70s when it wasn't widely talked about. And yeah, how they're viewed in the neighborhood, how they're viewed by society. And it's really interesting because the girls themselves have very little dialogue. So they really have to do a lot with their bodies and with their expressions, with the way they're placed within scenes. Sophia gets really great performances out of her young actresses. I remember Kirsten talking a lot about how good Sophia was as a director and how well she would work with the young actors and really coax like these performances out of them. Oh, that's right. It's also got a very young Josh Hartnett as well, looking very 70s-ish in this one. And a great soundtrack. I love the soundtrack. It's got a lot of great songs by Heart. Air does a band called Air does the score, and this is one of my
got the score.
This is one of my favorite movie scores. It's unsettling, it's beautiful, it's haunting. It perfectly fits the movie and the novel. And I have loved this movie since I was 14 years old. I was so excited when I was able to order the Blu-ray from the UK when it finally came out on Blu-ray. And I got the Criterion Collection one. Again, it's not a movie that you can rewatch often because it is a very heavy movie, and it does leave you feeling very drained by the end of it. But whenever you do watch it, it's just so easy to get lost in it. And I think Sofia Coppola, she's really good with portraying female isolation. She's got movies like this one, Marie Antoinette, The Beguiled, where you see these females in this situation where they are being observed by other people, but they can't really come into their own characterization because they're in these oppressive and suppressive environments. And I think this is just one of the best examples. So fantastic movie, really hits you hard. I mean, it's triggering, obviously, because of the subject matter. So you do have to be careful when you're going into it. Make sure you're in the right frame of mind to watch a movie like this. But if anyone hasn't seen it, I would highly recommend it because it is just so good. And it's Sofia Coppola is one of my favorite directors, and it's such a strong debut for her. So that's my number 2, The Virgin Suicides. Absolutely love it.
Okay, yeah, you said everything. I think it's a great movie as well. Like, obviously, you have that little bit more of a personal connection, but it made a big impact on me, and it was such a good debut, and the music and everything. I need to read the book, actually.
I was about to ask if you've read the novel, but no, you definitely should read it. It's so good.
Yeah, I've read a different novel by that novelist, but I haven't read that one, so I need to. I think I might have started it at some point. But my number 2, I'm actually jumping back another couple of decades. I'm going to the 40s this time.
Oh.
And this is a British classic this time, which definitely has gone down as one of the great British movies ever. In fact, there's a reference to it in Wallace and Gromit, of all things. And that is A Matter of Life and Death from Powell and Pressburger. Have you heard of this film?
No, I don't think I've even... No, I haven't.
Okay, well, the one Wallace and Gromit thing was A Matter of Loaf and Death. That was their kind of spin on it. But...
That's cute.
Yeah, classic stuff. So, yeah, this is really, again, ahead of its time. Like, Powell Pressburger, they were a classic, like, British film directing pair. One did the script, one did the directing, and made some of the best British movies of all time. So, things like Black Narcissus, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, The Red Shoes, many sort of classics.
Oh, The Red Shoes. I like
You've
The Red
heard
Shoes.
of that?
Yeah, I own The Red Shoes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good film. Yeah, it's a very good film.
Yeah.
Okay, so A Matter of Life and Death. The setup is then you have a pilot played by David Niven, and his plane is going down, and he sort of draws a connection to like the operator on the other end of the thing. On the comm talking, and so she's talking to him as the plane's going down, so it's this almost romantic sort of scene where like this is the last person he's talking to, and even though they can't see each other, they kind of draw like a connection. And so then you get this surreal twist where the plane goes down and he does die, but what then happens is because of an administrated error in heaven, he gets a second shot at life.
Oh, that's kind of funny. An administrative error in heaven.
Yeah, that's what it is. Like, it really goes.
The angels aren't on their game.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a great idea. And so part of the movie is set up in heaven with them sort of debating this. It's almost like a court case. It was like,
Oh wow.
well, it was our mistake. Should we let him off because of that? Or should we, he died, that's that. So it's this grand sort of like debate throughout the film, like, should he live or should he die? Should he stay in heaven or should he be allowed a second? And obviously then the romance comes into it because he did become drawn to this character, and you get a great sort of romance, and you get scenes that are down on earth, you get scenes in heaven, and it does have quite a surreal sort of touch, a very sort of arty type touch. And for a film from the 40s to be doing this, it was like really ahead of its time, so original. And I think many films or TV episodes have sort of copied like a similar idea since. It sort of adds a little bit of a romantic plot in it, a little bit of a World War style plot to it. But it is a very different sort of movie. Like, it doesn't feel like a typical movie from those sorts of genres. You've got great casting with David Niven and also I forget the name of the actress, but she's really great. And they've got great chemistry, and it's a really sweet, beautiful film with like great fantasy sort of touches and style. Like, they were always great at using color, which has stood the test of time, and it's one of the best films that this country has ever produced, really. So yeah, Matter of Life and Death is my number 2. And
very nice.
Yeah, and I think Stairway to Heaven is an alternative title for that. I have seen that title used for it.
I've never heard of it, but might have to see if I can find it somewhere. I just had a look at it. It's got Richard Attenborough in it as well.
Yeah, I forgot he was in it. Yeah.
Very cool. All right, number 1. I have no idea what your number 1 is going to be. You have such a varied like music movie taste. You've always got like lots of different movies, whereas mine all tend to be from like my childhood, or they're like movies that have like memories attached and stuff like that. My number 1 movie. Now this. Like, I've had a few movies that have moved in and out of my number 1 over the years. Like, at one point, Virgin Suicides was my favorite. At one point, Mulholland Drive was my favorite. But this movie was my favorite when I was a child, and it was one of my favorite for years and years and years. I've been watching it since I was 10. It is also based on what is my favorite novel of all time. I absolutely adore the book that this is based on, and I collect different copies of it. I actually own, I think now, about 15 different copies, possibly more. I just love all the different versions that they bring out. And this, in my mind, I mean, this book has been adapted so many times for film, for the stage, even as a TV show. But this, in my mind, is the best adaptation, and that is 1994's Little Women, directed by Gillian Armstrong. So that is my number 1. And yes, of course, Keith knew it. Yes. Look, most people know this story. This is the tale of the March sisters. The first part of the movie is when they're young. It takes place in the same with the first part of the book. Just takes place a year in their lives. Their father is off at the Civil War, so they live with their mother. You have Meg, the eldest, Joe, the wild one, Beth, the shy one, and Amy, the youngest. Fantastic freaking casting in this movie. Winona Ryder plays Joe, the main character. Joe is one of those characters that I identified with so much as a child, because she was a tomboy. She was always getting into scrapes. She didn't like convention. She didn't like rules. She didn't like having to be girly and demure. So I was definitely Joe. And she was also a writer, and I loved to write when I was younger. So you've got her as Joe. You have a very, very young Kirsten Dunst as younger Amy, and she is fantastic. Samantha Mathis plays older Amy. She's okay. Kirsten is definitely better. Very young Claire Danes playing Beth, and an actress called Trini Alvarado playing Meg. She's mostly known for stage, and but she did do some movies in the 90s. Meredith, I was not a fan of the 2019 adaptation at all. Screenplay for this it just captures the novel. Like, it doesn't, like, obviously they make changes for the movie because you always have to adjust things for movies, but I've never seen a movie capture the heart and the spirit of a novel better than this one. It has one of my favorite movie scores. The composer is Thomas Newman, and this score is almost like the book has come to life in music form. Like, when you listen to the music, and if you've read the book, you're just like, yes, this is Little Women. And like I said, the performances are all great. I think the chemistry between the sisters is fantastic. Susan Sarandon plays Marmee, the mother, and she is so good. Now, I do think there are some issues with the second half of the movie. The focus kind of moves a little bit too much on Jo, and the other three sisters get a little bit forgotten about. But given the angle they were taking for this movie, I think it does make sense that it did that. And it's just such a beautiful story. Little Women, the novel, I love because it's one of those novels that, because it's not really a, like, the plot of it is, it's just everyday life. So it's not even like a proper narrative. It's just more like little vignettes of like glimpses into the March's lives. So you can pretty much literally open the book up at any chapter and just read like a little mini story and then just leave it. So I often will reread the book if I'm eating or if I'm like waiting for something, or I'll just pick up the novel and reread it. And I just think that, yeah, this movie just gets it so well. This was one of the first roles I ever saw Winona Ryder in, and she became one of my absolute favorite actresses, if not my favorite actress of all time. Absolutely fell in love with her performance in this. Christian Bale plays Laurie, who's their neighbor, and he and Winona have amazing chemistry. They are so, so good together. And every time I watch this movie, this is my go-to movie if I'm having a bad day. If I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling down or I'm in a lot of pain, I will put this movie on and it will just instantly make me feel better. Literally know the whole thing off by heart, have since I was 11 years old. If we ever watch it, you could probably just mute it and I can recite the whole movie for you. But yeah, I visited it over, and this is one of those ones where I wore the VHS out rewatching it when I was younger, because I used to watch it over and over and over again until the VHS was just like, you are not doing this to me anymore. And I have this on DVD until a few years ago when Steven special ordered the Blu-ray for me from the UK. So yeah, I absolutely loved getting this, and it was just, I just adore it. It's just one of my, there's a reason it's been with me for so long. So that is my number one movie, and also my number one book, if anyone's curious, Little Women, 1994. Watch this version. It's the best one.
Yeah. No, it's a comfort blanket of a movie.
What do those girls do over there all day?
Over the mysteries of female life, there is drawn a veil, best left undisturbed.
Hockey! Revenge is mine!
Publish it, Joe, really.
Columbia Pictures invites you to share the holidays with a family of little women. Joe.
If I were going to be a writer, I'd go to New York and pursue the stage. Are you shocked?
Very.
Meg.
What's that strange smell?
You've ruined me!
Beth.
What's your Christmas wish?
Perhaps we could send the Hummels our bread. They have so little and we have so much.
Amy.
I've waited my whole life to be kissed. And what if I miss it?
I promise to kiss you before you die.
There's been more.
Through times of hardship.
Baby!
And times of joy.
Marry it all. Why can't things just stay as they are?
I have loved you since the moment I clapped eyes on you.
Daddy, please don't ask me.
Shared their tears.
I love being home, but I don't like being left behind.
Winona Ryder, Trini Alvarado, Samantha Mathis, Kirsten Dunst, Claire Danes, and Susan Sarandon. The story that has lived in our hearts for generations comes to the screen for the holidays.
Oh, I should have smelled Little Women.
Yeah, it's a good movie. They cast it so well. It's a good period piece, like you said. Bit of a heartwarming, weepy. Yeah,
definitely.
I can see why it would be a good comfort blanket. And Susan Sarandon, I'll call out as well. Great casting as the mother. Always fantastic. Absolutely. And I like when you sort of get like an actress who's a veteran actress like that. And you sort of mix her up with some of the newer sort of fresher talent.
Yeah, no, it was great. And I recently watched Kirsten Dunst talking about like a bunch of movies that she had done, and she was saying that she went from Interview at the Vampire, which was a very male set, to Little Women, and she said it was so great to be around like all these strong actresses and these amazing actresses that took her under their wings, and working with Winona, working with Susan, and it was just she said it was such a nurturing and such a lovely environment to be on, and I think that really comes across in the movie. I have no idea. I mean, it could be anything.
Yeah, great.
Could even be Scream 3. No?
Well, this isn't the worst. This isn't the worst movies list.
Rude.
Okay. Well, my number one, when I say it's our only crossover of the list, you'll know what it is. I had to have a David Lynch movie somewhere. It was almost Blue Velvet, like that. That's an honourable mention in many ways, but no, it's Mulholland Drive. That's my number one.
Is awesome, and I wholeheartedly approve.
Yeah, I don't have to say much. Rachel sort of said it, and the least you know about this movie, the better going.
Yes.
But it's one of the great enigmas of our time. There you go. I have rewatched it quite a lot, but it just has this amazing energy to it, this amazing visual style. Like you said in our review, he just puts so much detail into it. Like, it is very meta, like it's a great commentary on Hollywood. But I think Lynch is someone who's got like a fondness for the classic movie era. And,
yes.
And that is the side that doesn't get looked at in some ways, because I think there is love in this movie towards that era. Like he just has a passion for like the way things used to be, the idea of a resume photograph. But then you do get the darker stuff, and it's a fantastic riddle. And I won't talk too much about the riddle, but it's great that there is kind of an answer. But as we unpacked in our review, where Rachel dug out like the clues that Lynch is giving, it's maybe not as clear cut as some people think, the answer to the riddle. But even if you do fall down on that side of it, there's still many other mini mysteries. Like, it will take so many viewings, and you'll never fully get this movie. And that's just part of the experience and its kind of charm. Great casting in the lead roles. Naomi Watts really has never been better. She's always great, but this was a calling card. When you see the twist in the movie, you'll see why it's such a good performance. Justin Theroux is very good in the movie as well. Almost as a younger like Lynch. I think that is Lynch.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, and his scenes are very entertaining, and just a gem of casting like Jacob from Lost. Worst hitman ever. The guy from Lost, who's in the Winky scene as well. We've also got Billy Ray Cyrus, and
he's probably upset, Lorraine.
Robert Foster in a small role that he kind of steals. So it's brilliant. It's so layered. It's so entertaining. It's so challenging and thought provoking, and got wonderful music as always. Yeah, it is my top two. This and Blue Velvet are my top two Lynch movies. I go back and forth. I think I just went with this one because it's obviously it's a complex from riddle, and it's a little bit more accessible than Blue Velvet.
Yeah,
I mean, in a way, the storyline's a bit more challenging, but Blue Velvet is so extreme.
Frank is just the most horrific villain ever.
Yeah, he was my top villain when we did that.
Yeah.
Unforgettable villain. But yeah, Lynch always comes up with great characters in his movies. Yeah. And this is littered with them. We also love the cowboy scene and that.
This is the girl. He doesn't have eyebrows, man.
Yeah, you get a small cameo from his composer, Angelo Badalamenti, R.I.P. He died in recent years, but he composed a lot of Lynch's movies, and he's the guy spitting out the coffee in that scene. So, again, very meta. Yes. So yeah, it's a wonderful. It's almost like a definitive kind of Hollywood like mystery satire. Great neo-noir type film, but I love
good.
It. Mulholland Drive was my number one. Had to be a David Lynch film.
I can't believe it. I'm just so excited to be here. I'm in this dream place.
This one comes highly recommended.
Dream place. What are you doing?
Get out of the car.
Yeah. The girl is still missing.
What's wrong?
I just don't know who I am.
I wonder where you were going. Mulholland Drive. Come on, it'll be just like in the movies. We'll pretend to be someone else.
This is all an illusion.
You want to know who you are, don't you?
Where's this going?
Mulholland Drive.
It's been a very strange day.
Getting stranger.
Varied, and like you pretty much just came up with it recently, didn't you? You were just trying to compose it, whereas mine has been like, I mean, this has been my favorite.
It's pretty much
this is pretty much set in stone. See, so now I showed these to Keith earlier. I was like, I've got all my props, so now they're all here.
Okay.
That was great. That was really fun. I really enjoyed hearing all of your top 10 movies.